overanalyzes and 20 degrees with the draw.
I figure I'll just get straight to the point. My least favorite episode in the entire Pokemon anime is Crowning the Skullchop King, episode 126 of the Black and White / Best Wishes saga. It aired in May of 2013 in Japan and August of 2013 overseas. It was an episode that, as a kid, I hated so much in tandem with several other determining factors, it made me actively avoid the anime in its entirety until mid-XY. Now your immediate thought might be to ask, why exactly? Best Wishes is filled to the brim with some of the most negatively received episodes in the entire Pokemon series. In the Shadow of Zekrom, Dazzling the Nimbasa Gym, Lost at the League, a Unova League Evolution. What is it about Crowning the Skullchop King, an ultimately inconsequential episode from the Decalore Islands arc, a filler arc meant to buy time until XY came out, that makes it such a notable source of disdain for you in comparison to episodes such as those? To be frank, I dislike a lot of those episodes too, and we will get to that, but they've been talked about endlessly. I saw this episode when I was 11, and since then it has been a very personal thorn in my side that all but exemplifies my qualms with this series and its messaging. Let's talk about it. Before we jump into an analysis of the episode proper and everything I dislike about it, I'd like to preface things with some context. Oshawott is my favorite Pokemon. Really, it extends to the whole line, Duat and Samurott included. I know a lot of people don't like Samurott's design, but that's a discussion for another day. Part of the reason I grew so attached to the Oshawott line, aside from the fact that it was my first Pokemon ever in Black 2, was because Ash's Oshawott in the anime was my hero. I strongly identified with the character, and thought his antics and personality were very endearing. I thought the use of his Skullchop was really cool, and I would always root for him whenever he was on screen, even when the show didn't really want me to. In my eyes, Oshawott was always a shining diamond in the rough of the Best Wishes anime, a refreshing character relative to some of the more controversial choices that saga made. Unfortunately, a lot of those controversial writing choices came directly at the expense of the character. He was kicked around, he was constantly being shot down and turned away as a bit, he'd be at the brunt of conflicts that sometimes weren't even his fault. He'd be the fall guy while other Pokemon got to stick around and save the day. There was a constant recycling of the whole unfunny karmic punishment for a bit of arrogance beat. His enthusiasm was constantly being taken advantage of, and, perhaps most egregiously, his battle record was extremely and consistently poor. It really just felt like the writing for Best Wishes had it out for Oshawott, and over the 72 or so episodes he makes an appearance in, conservatively over a third of them feature some kind of antagonization in that vein. Some would say Oshawott is just a bad and unlikable character who deserved what he got, and to those people, you're probably right. I don't personally agree, and I think how he was treated speaks volumes about the writing. And as an autistic child who almost projected himself onto the character, seeing all this very targeted vitriol as a kid really blew and would almost bring me to a point where I'd not want to see Oshawott on screen at all for fear of him being used as a butt monkey in a new, exciting way. So you can imagine how I felt to see an episode with him as a primary focus, the first one in a while, all but exemplifying the issues with his portrayal. The episode begins with Ash, Iris, and Silent continuing their voyage through the Decalore Islands by cruise ship, obvious joke, when they notice that a lot of the passengers for this particular stop are trainers with Oshawott and Duat. They ask the porter what's going on, and he reveals that the next stop is to Skullchop Island, an island shaped like Oshawott's shell, where they're holding the annual Skullchop King competition. This consists of various Skullchop-themed activities, capping off with a battle that will determine the year's Skullchop King. Naturally, Ash's own Oshawott eavesdrops and wants to join the competition. And just like that, we have our episode plot. On the island, the gang oohs and ahs over all the Skullchop-themed memorabilia, and I'd gotta be honest, I'd be all over this sort of stuff too. I gotta go to Mie someday. This place is like the only joint you'll see positive attention towards this line in an official capacity anymore. Soon enough, the opening ceremony kicks off with the recurring Freddie O'Martin taking the stage in a giant Skullchop costume, which, this is silly, I like this. He unveils that the grand prize for winning the competition is this solid gold Skullchop, piquing the interest of everyone in the crowd. This includes Team Rocket, who obviously wants to steal the prize for their own nefarious purposes. I won't be talking about them much at all because they quite honestly add nothing to the episode aside from being an additional nuisance. Meowth cosplays as a Duat. I don't know the ethics of this, but it's something. It's all you really need to know. We are then introduced to the winner of the female division of the competition that took place prior to us getting here, the Scalchop Queen, Oshawott, who of course Ash's Oshawott is immediately enamored by. So, it's one of these. Now, this is admittedly a complaint that didn't really set in quite as much until I got older, but Oshawott is a prop. She's not a character so much as she is quite literally an object of Oshawott and the other competitors' affections. I'm not saying she needs an elaborate backstory or even much of an established personality, but it feels like she was only really incorporated into the story to fall back on Oshawott's girl-crazy nature. Even then, it's fine for Oshawott to want to win this competition to impress a girl, but the idea that Oshawott is just one of the material prizes being directly insinuated by the competition is not a good look, in my opinion. Maybe I'm overthinking this, but considering that Pokemon are sentient beings capable of their own preferences and thoughts, as we will see later in the episode, the implications of their needing to be a Scalchop Queen to the king are a little uncomfortable. In any case, upon seeing Oshawott dashes up to the front of the crowd, offering a bouquet of flowers he either took from someone or conjured up, which is pretty funny. She rejects him and walks away. When he tries again, he's smacked on the head by Caesar, this duot with a bandana who looks suspiciously similar to another duot with a bandana from a few episodes ago. I do think maybe Oshawott should have taken the hint here, but it's pretty obvious they just wanted a way to introduce the "is he bothering you, queen" duot, while also making Oshawott look bad. Through Ash showing an uncharacteristic amount of concern for his Oshawott, we are introduced to Caesar's trainer Cadbury, who declares that Oshawott deserved that for getting close to the queen, and that Caesar had been specifically trained for the position of Scalchop King. His being a dick serves as another incentive for Ash and Oshawott to compete. It's worth noting that he clarifies that Oshawott is not his Pokemon. In fact, we never see Oshawott's trainer at all, so I guess he's just being weird. I have to ask what their opinion would be on Caesar and Cadbury, as well as Ash and Oshawott for that matter. As we'll see at the end of the episode, it's difficult to rationalize some of the decision-making here, like who's doing what on whose behalf, what is the authority here? Is it like an arranged marriage sort of deal? Do they contact the original trainer of the queen after she gets together with the king? I don't know. We meet our judges, also all being recurring characters throughout Best Wishes, and the competition gets underway. The first round has each competitor's Oshawott or duot pulling out their Scalchops to be rated on appearance. There's an attempt at a joke in there about how they all look the same, but it gets the crowd turned. It may just be me, but I can't help but feel like the Oshawott are at an inherent disadvantage here due to only having one, as opposed to duot having two, and that's more or less reflected in the crowd's reaction as they and the judges naturally show a lot more enthusiasm towards Caesar than they do to Ash's Oshawott. Nonetheless, they both qualify for the next round. Here we've got a target the participants are prompted to aim and throw their Scalchops at. Again, duot gets 2 whole shots at this. Naturally, evolutions are going to be overall stronger than their base forms, but for a primarily recreational competition like this, it doesn't feel like they thought that through super hard. Go figure. Anyway, Ash's Oshawott is up first, and he manages to hit the target, but only barely. Caesar is right after, and shocker, he does a better job. This is a consistent theme in the episode. You have Oshawott doing something that at best leads to barely being successful, while either immediately before or immediately after, you have him being completely outdone by this duot. If I repeat myself a lot here, it's because this episode repeats itself a lot. It recycles this one bit over and over again, and it gets really tiring. Good underdog stories are supposed to ebb and flow in or out of favor of the underdog, not punch down on them until they get lucky. We have a few more rounds after this, including this brick-breaking thing, which is kind of a neat homage to that one Pokeathlon minigame in Heart Gold Soul Silver, I guess, and this performance thing where the Watts have to put on a show with their Scalchops. Caesar aquajets in a circle with his Scalchops held out, creating a nice little rainbow, and Ash gets the bright idea to just copy that. It seems to be going well at first, until Oshawott sees Oshawott and, distracted, veers off course and screws it up. Obviously no one's happy about it, and it's honestly just kind of miserable hearing everyone have something to say about how much that sucked, especially because, spoiler, it doesn't go anywhere. This performance round is also where Meowth's Watt face begins to fail and Team Rocket unveils themselves. Again, they barely have any relevance to the episode, and I bring them up specifically because they're immediately blasted off by Pikachu. Really? Pikachu. Okay, You have this one entire episode focused around Oshawott, a character who had, a long time back, fought off Team Rocket on his lonesome. You give him an opportunity to show some heroism after he had screwed up an act and got shit on by an entire crowd, as well as call back to a moment early on in the series in the final arc of the saga, and you just have Pikachu take it. Why else was Team Rocket in this episode? There is no reason for them to be here other than to show Oshawott's noble qualities when fighting them, which they actively neglected to do. Finally, with Ash and Cadbury being the only remaining competitors, we skip to the final round where Oshawott and Caesar are tasked with battling each other in a pool for the title of Skullchop King. And when I say in a pool, I mean on a pool, because neither of them actually swim in the thing for surprise attacks or anything, they just have a balancing act on floats. What follows is an exhausting one-sided back and forth of Oshawott and Caesar trading blows, with the latter consistently overpowering the former, with pretty much the exact same moveset plus Surf. Best Wishes is host to a lot of battles that are just really annoying and frustrating back and forths that are not entertaining to watch at all, and this is no exception. I think it's mainly a tactic to reuse animation, which this saga did a lot of, but I'm not really sure. Anyway, we're back to this whole bit of anything you can do, I can do better, going on for several minutes with Oshawott getting his ass beat. There's some banter about focusing on battling with Skullchops, because Skullchop, until Cadbury has Caesar close in on Oshawott with an Aqua Jet / double Razor Shell finisher. Ash has Oshawott do something similar, except with his Skullchop's blade at the tip of his Aqua Jet, and then he spins around to create a sort of Aqua Jet drill. It's unfortunate that this combo is only ever used in this episode, because divorced from everything, it's pretty badass and feels like something you'd see out of pre-Unova Ash. The attacks clash, with Oshawott's blade landing dead onto Caesar's head. Seriously, I'm not sure what the endgame was here. If they were trying to illustrate that this was the advantage to having one Skullchop instead of two, when every other round of the competition reasonably favors the two, I'm not sure they did a very good job when Oshawott was clearly struggling for this entire fight. Regardless, the head trauma does Caesar in for the fight, and just like that, Oshawott is declared the winner of the Skullchop King competition, ergo being crowned the Skullchop King. Hey, that's the name of... He comes to the stage for the closing ceremony and happily accepts the golden Skullchop, and for a moment it looks like Oshawott is finally going to have some satisfying closure after the hell this series has put him through. You know where this is going. Freddy O. Fazbear announces that as per the competition's rules, Oshawott's status as king will necessitate he stays on Skullchop Island along with Osharina for an entire year until the next event. A more annoying person than me would make a joke here about it being impossible for time to pass in the anime due to Ash being perpetually 10 years old, but either way this has Ash distressed. I guess it took them until now, after the competition had already formally concluded, for the gang to actually bother reading the rules. Though I would assume the implication of Ash and Oshawott having to separate was already there even outside of the Japanese episode title. Oshawott is a bit sad at the thought of leaving his trainer behind, but is also more than ready to rule the island with this girl he's in love with. As Ash contemplates releasing Oshawott, we get a series of flashbacks consisting of all the good memories the two shared on their travels in Unova. And this might come off as insignificant, but I believe the selection of flashbacks we get here to be very telling. We see clips of Ash being introduced to Oshawott in Juniper's lab, Oshawott beating Pansage in the gym battle against Silent, tying with Watchog in the rematch against Lenora, training with a giant Skullchop from the time he had lost his old one, and finally defeating Krokorok in the gym battle against Clay. This final flashback being from a gym battle that took place 65 episodes prior. They were very selective with this sequence of flashbacks, and unfortunately there is a reason that there weren't any taking place after Clay. As we prefaced earlier on in the video, this series was consistently horrible to Oshawott, and that became especially true in the latter half of the series when the writers pretty much gave up on wanting to do anything worthwhile with the character because of his lack of popularity. Many of Oshawott's non-battling appearances after the fact relegated him to a supporting role where he was just there to look cute and get punched or something. You had the arc with Meloetta, which actively regressed Dawn's Piplup's character development from Diamond and Pearl, just so Oshawott had a foil and could get further antagonized. But it's okay apparently, because he made the funny Reddit meme face. After that came to an underwhelming end, with Oshawott not even being used in the Junior Cup. It wasn't until we got to the Unova League when we saw Oshawott get used in a fight again. Put a pin in this one, we will come back to it. After that, we got an embarrassing loss against Charon's Herdier that had no reason to happen other than children finding it funny when Oshawott struggles and Ash angrily yells at him, I guess. It feels like almost every time Oshawott showed up on screen, especially later on, he was going to be met with some sort of abuse, and this spanned across both his battles and his more casual moments. The battle with Clay was the last time Oshawott was allowed to do something of value, and the series is outright admitting to this through this choice of flashbacks. It's honestly a little embarrassing, and it's another indictment to the lack of respect the writers truly have for the character. Things didn't have to be this way, and they certainly didn't have to draw attention to it. Anyway, after that interaction, Oshawott suddenly dashes off stage, jumping into the crowd, into the arms of Caesar. As it turns out, Cadbury was right, and Caesar turned out to be the ideal match for Oshawott after all. In spite of the cruelty put on display here, I would ordinarily commend her for taking initiative regarding her preference, but between this and how cold she was to Ash's Oshawott at the beginning of the episode, a lot of the conflict here could have been easily avoided if there was the slightest bit of communication. Again, Oshawott's trainer is nowhere to be seen, and as a result, the only other second party that can speak on behalf of what she really wants is Cadbury. It ultimately comes back to her being a prop to be won rather than a character, since she has no one to bounce off of. I also didn't include this in the script, but as it turns out, in the Japanese version, Cadbury directly confirms that Caesar and Oshawott were already a thing prior to the tournament, so what was the point there? When Oshawott sees the two cuddled up to each other, he's so heartbroken that even his Scalchop snaps in two. He's left there lying on the stage as Freddy declares that a broken Scalchop is grounds for instant disqualification, so between that and Caesar earning the affection of Oshawott, Oshawott's title is stripped and given to him instead. Just to add insult to injury, we have a final shot of Oshawott still in shock, alone, as the crowd cheers. So ultimately, all of this was for nothing. The battle, the attempt at an emotional series of flashbacks, all of what happened in the past 20 minutes, for nothing. It didn't even matter that Oshawott won the battle, his first victory in 65 episodes, because it wasn't treated as a victory, and any sense of closure was thrown away for the sake of cruel comedy at his expense, much like so many other instances in this series. On the ship at sunset, they try to close the episode out with another gag that shows Oshawott bouncing back, chasing after a Chinchino, which honestly doesn't do too much to soften the blow. Ash also attempts to console Oshawott by saying this:
"Cheer up, Oshawott! Now we can keep on traveling together, right?"
And for what? In less than 20 episodes, Ash was heading to Kalos. He'd leave all of his Unova Pokemon behind, not to be seen again until their cameos and journeys. Oshawott would get a few more appearances after this, but it was more of the same butt monkey humor at his expense, including recycling a bit with Pig Knight that had long outstayed its welcome, and an entire Pikachu short that aired with the Genesect movie where he was only included to be whipped around and antagonized. Nothing would have fundamentally changed if things had actually worked out for Oshawott and Ash had ultimately released him. In fact, it probably would have been better. In spite of the series doing its utmost to try and get me to laugh at the character's misfortune, whether he deserved it or not, he did deserve closure, and it's not something we ever meaningfully got. And frankly, what the writers believed the character deserved was something that was already well established. The Unova League episode Cameron's Secret Weapon, that one, has Oshawott competing in his only ever tournament battle in a saga full of them. He's pit up against the titular secret weapon, Cameron's Hydreigon, after Boulder goes down. Immediately it's clear this matchup is unfavorable for Oshawott, and this whole battle is rightfully something the anti-Poke fandom has not let go of. This is acknowledged in the show, with Ash's friends commenting that Oshawott is being used to do chip damage rather than actually take down Hydreigon. Bianca even explicitly says,
"Are you saying Oshawott's Ash's throwaway Pokemon?"
And just like that, the writers went fully mask off with what they thought of the character, using Bianca as a surrogate. It didn't even matter that Silent came to Ash's defense, especially because it was on his behalf without Ash properly saying anything, because Oshawott predictably lost the fight anyway, having barely done any damage. Now, while crowning the Scalchop King is my least favorite episode of the entire anime, this exchange of dialogue and subsequent match is my least favorite individual moment in the entire anime. Because much like the flashbacks from Scalchop King, it's a telling indictment of the spite the writers seem to have against this character, and by extension, fans of the character. To even explicitly insinuate that one of Ash's Pokemon was cannon fodder, and especially to have that claim backed up multiple times across the series, almost feels like a sacrilegious contradiction of the Pokemon anime's messaging of partnership and individuality. As opposed to the competitive, rigid nature of the games that often demands a sacrificial playstyle, the anime has made a conscious effort to distance itself from that and focus on the idea of holding out faith in your companions, for better or for worse. This tactic was specifically something that Paul did in Diamond and Pearl, and for that he was framed as uncouth, but I guess Ash is able to get away with doing much the same under the guise of cheap comedy due to being the protagonist. But above all, this moment came across as an instance in which the writers looked directly at the viewer and said, "Hey, this is what we think of your favorite character. Fuck you." Crowning the Scalchop King feels like that thought extended out for an entire episode. As a kid, I was under the impression that the lesson being taught here was that Oshawott never really deserved to be happy or get any meaningful closure, and simply existed as a literal lightning rod you were supposed to laugh at the misfortune of rather than root for. I recognize now as an adult that this likely wasn't totally the intention, but it still stuck with me and continues to stick with me to this day. It kind of led me into looking into the other portrayals of Oshawott in the anime and realized that things weren't exclusive to Ash's. From what I can see even now, almost every other character with a member of the Oshawott line has been explicitly portrayed to be either stupid, incompetent, an asshole, or all three. Even Horizons, which I gave a chance in spite of everything because I wanted to see my favorite Pokemon be represented in a show that didn't display active contempt for it. This character, Anne, hasn't won a single battle on screen. They try to fluff her up with dialogue about how apparently good she is, but they do nothing but back up the contrary. She exists to lose. This entire line of Pokemon must have every instance of their being on screen punctuated by the sentiment that they are a useless liability rather than a reliable asset and friend, much like every other starter Pokemon in the series. I could also get into how the games have treated the line, with base Samurott being terrible competitively and outright replaced by a regional form, but once again, that's a discussion for another day. Despite everything, I still love Oshawott. I'm always going to love Oshawott no matter how much that annoys people. And ultimately, that's why Crowning the Scalchop King is, in my opinion, one of, if not the worst episodes in the entire anime. Not because of it individually being awful, but because of how it epitomizes all of the frustrating, cruel, and stupid traits of the entire anime, especially the Black and White saga, featuring a character who a lot of people like sometimes, but whose only purpose to the writer was to be miserable. It contradicts the messaging of the series, and personally has had a lasting impact on me as I resonated with the character. The Journeys episode Bearing Down Easy is conversely one of my favorites in the anime because it treats Oshawott with a lot of respect. It shows what happens when he's unshackled from the naturally angry and spiteful writing style of the Best Wishes saga. Because of this, I'm more tempted to believe that instances like this and the High Dragon fight are more so Best Wishes problems than Pokemon anime problems overall. Either way, though, it's something I'm always going to hold against the series. It has irreparably damaged my view of this show and of this brand as a whole, really. Oshawott's poor treatment across the entire franchise, save for, a prefecture in the middle of nowhere, has actively diminished my connection to the Pokemon series, and in my eyes, the anime and Crowning the Scalchop King especially were the first dominoes to fall. I want to thank those who made it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed what you saw, consider leaving a like and subscribing. I don't upload too often to this channel, and this is my first one in a while, as you can see, but it's something I might want to jump back into at some point. If you just want to hear more from me, feel free to follow my social media, including my Blue Sky, where I post art. Thank you again.